All right, this is Brian Johnson, staff writer with Finance and Commerce newspaper, and I'm pleased to be joined with Drew Johnson, Senior Vice President of Development and lead of Oppidan's data center practices here in the Twin Cities. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the data center trends in the Twin Cities and beyond, as well as what Oppidan's been doing and up to in that sector. But first, thanks for joining me, Drew. How you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, so we've obviously, I guess I was looking at your website and saw some pretty eye-popping statistics about. I see that you sort of track your data center activity on connectdatacenter.com. Looks like nationally you have more than 10 million square feet of projects, $5 billion total project value, if I remember that correctly. Tell me a little bit about that, about your data center practice, and what's driving all that development.
Yeah, no, thanks. Again, thanks for having me. So Oppidan, we delivered our first data center in 2018 and started working in the space in 2016. And, I was still also doing, industrial mixed use development. Because it was, data centers, I think, had been around for a while, but as far as the interface on the real estate side, versus it being kind of a business to business deal, was just in its infancy. And, the first data center we delivered in Northern Virginia in 2018, we were to get our construction loan, we had to convince the bank that there was a path to convert it back to warehouse, should this data center thing go away. So we were showing,
Hmm.
knockouts for truck docks and trailer drops and parking and talking about bay depths and that thing. And
Hmm.
needless to say that the pace has just accelerated since then. Since our first project in 2018, we delivered on both coasts, working with a single tenant, started getting into multi-story builds. And then, the sites got larger, the power went up, started getting into substation delivery, working, very closely with utilities. And then just probably about 3 years ago, we landed another hyperscale client that we're delivering for nationally. Um, one of the projects nationally was just approved in Egan. So we're really excited about that. Those are smaller data centers. They're designed to boost, network and, kind of simplify the compute as information is going over fiber optic networks around the country.
Yeah, so uh, how much of that? So your data center practice is national. You have projects and clients all over the country. How much of And you mentioned the Egan project, which I wrote about recently, and how much of your activity is happening here locally in the Twin Cities, Metro and beyond?
Locally, it's very, Minnesota's lagged behind kind of on a national basis on a lot of data center investments. So not much locally, that could change. Obviously we know our own, backyard, and I think with some of this, just because Minnesota has kind of lagged in data center investment, and I think we have good infrastructure here compared to a lot of different places. Like I always give this example that we were doing one of these data centers in a kind of a, I don't know if you want to call it southeast or on the northern side of southeast, kind of mid continent south, and in a large city. And we had to build, this isn't a huge data center, but we had to build a surge tank so our sewer could dribble out overnight because the city's sewer capacity was so um hadn't received much upgrades or investments or anything, and it was becoming a barrier to developing any product in that city. And that's an example is that my sense is Minnesota, doesn't have those sort of challenges and that, the water, sewer, power, roads, infrastructure is very sound compared to, a lot of the other parts of the country that we develop in. But that said, and I think also the commitment to get to carbon free by 2040, which is a big part of, Minnesota, that aligns, as you've probably saw and reported about, that aligns really well with all of the major hyperscalers' climate goals. So, Minnesota is kind of interesting in that, we have, a comparable um, data center incentive that's probably shared by half the states around the country. Ours isn't quite as competitive as some of the other regions or some of the other states, but we have good infrastructure. We have a good workforce. We have a lot of construction talent. We have a data center incentives tax program through Minnesota Revenue. We don't have great fiber optics, compared to the Des Moines, the Omahas, some of that, um, but yeah, we've really lagged behind in data center investment, both on a per capita basis and, on a relative basis. Areas like Des Moines and Omaha really, are much larger, despite being smaller cities and smaller MSAs on their data center presence. Um, but you'd think that that would start to change, even though some of our networking and our cost of power and our permitting timelines are longer. But we'll see.
At the same time, we are seeing some big projects. The project in Becker that Amazon bought 350 acres or something up there for a big data center project. There's the Meta project under construction in Rosemont, $800 million project or something like that. So do you see, do you see, believe we're starting to go on that upward trajectory now in
I
terms
think
of,
we are. Yeah, and I think it's gonna be a little bit fits and starts, and we track kind of all these projects and that, to our knowledge, the project in Becker, and I think Microsoft also closed on land up there, but there's not, we haven't seen anything public for land use submittals or building permits, or, nothing has been on Becker, city council that I'm aware of. I think the project that's furthest along is the Cloud HQ project in Chaska, in that I think they're 100% through the city. Believe I read that they had closed on the land. Um, and then, we wouldn't know if they had submitted for building permits or, if they're, but I don't think they're moving dirt, and it probably would have been picked up if they had started to move dirt. Farmington, that's controversial, but as far as I know, that, or I think for a kind of a small group of residents is controversial. But I don't think I don't think they've closed on the land yet. Um, so
Mhm.
so I think, yeah, it's starting, all of that activity was, with the exception of Meta, which is the only one that's, actually under construction. You know, all of that activity a year ago wasn't here, you know, but it's not like the sky is filled with tower cranes, putting all of these things up, and there's the projects are so big and the design timelines are so long that, this idea where there's going to be, just, everything under construction at once, sort of, I think is not, if anyone's saying that, is not true. I think it's going to be,
Mhm.
something measured in, 5 years, 10 years, as they, ramp up and build, connect
Yeah.
to power and so forth.
Yeah, these are interesting projects in that, and as real estate people, we like to measure things in terms of square footage of the building and things of that nature. I was talking to Gordon from CBRE recently. He pointed out that, the main denominator for this type of project, you really need to look at the kilowatts or megawatts, because if you have I think his quote was, if you have a million square foot building and you're only able to plug in a small number of servers, that's doesn't serve a great purpose. So, any thoughts on that?
Completely, yeah. And that's the metric we use is megawatts, that the industry uses. Everything else is kind of based off of that. And with all of this, this new AI discussion and, square footage can get even kind of more skewed because if you look at, and we don't do any crypto or we've never built any crypto, but we can kind of tell those requirements because they don't invest in the cooling component of the data center because they just mine at nighttime or when it's cool. I think their economic model is, they shut the servers off if it's 90 degrees outside and they can't cool with outside air. Well, the megawatts on a building like that can be much higher on a per square footage basis, but if you have a regular, cloud provider that our banking website and medical records and everything that goes through, that has to be 24 hours a day. So you have to invest in cooling, and because of that cooling, your square footage goes up. The cooling is using more megawatts, and then that's why, yeah, square footage is pretty not it doesn't apply to much, especially as these rack densities are going up.
Mm-hmm. We were talking a little bit about some of the headwinds or barriers to development. Of course, the power capacity is a big one. What about the regulatory environment? Is that part of maybe why some of the other states are a little bit ahead of us, because it's more streamlined from an approval standpoint?
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't put that as, we've built in California, which is
Hmm.
and actually there may be a little bit they had data centers earlier because of Silicon Valley and some of that, so their process is longer, but they know how to handle it versus data centers being new to the regulatory environment here. But I would say, yes. Um, but I think it's still cost of power, um, fiber optics, which I think is that gap is sort of, that I think if you had, 6 or 7 kilowatt hour cost of power and you're in a high regulatory environment and there was available land, and again, Minnesota has good infrastructure in terms of roads, workers, sewer, water, that sort of thing. I still think the cost of power, available land, and access to fiber would, get over the regulatory side, short of it being, and I'm trying to think of a place where it's, short of it being just completely onerous or, moratoriums in place or something like that.
Hmm. Sure. Um, what about, so I guess, what is your overall outlook for 2025 here in the Twin Cities in terms of data center project starts and project deliveries?
We hope to be under construction this summer, fall in our Eagan facility.
Hmm.
Um, so much of these data center projects, because lead times are so long on so much of this big equipment that, we joke that we usually order like generators, transformers, STSs, HVAC units, wait 3 months and then start looking for land. And by the time you find land, design it, get it entitled, you can start construction and your stuff has already been on order for months. So I think, if unless someone is, that we don't, that the, between you guys and other, brokers tracking it, I don't think there's going to be much for 2025 starts here
Hmm.
just because the projects take so long and the lead times are so long. Could there be, 2026 starts? I think so. But yeah, and that's why, kind of this idea or some of the the buzz we're hearing on, media channels, this idea that someone's going to wake up and then just be, surrounded by data centers and power lines and, blackouts and is just not, one, I think, Minnesota does a good job of planning for that, but these projects just take so long that it's not the case. It's not a light switch or maybe like a spec warehouse where you just have to, if you're entitled, just order steel and, concrete roof pan or concrete panels, and then you're kind of off to the races. Where on, these data centers, you have to, order complicated mechanical and electrical systems, years in advance for it to be ready at scale.
Hmm. Interesting. A lot of moving parts there. Any other final perspectives or thoughts on this? Is you covered a lot of ground there and some great insight. Do you care to add anything to that or plug any particular projects you're working on? You talked about the Egan project, but
Yeah.
anything else?
I think some of this it's so interesting on this all this discussion around AI and then the new DeepSeek that came out and I guess and we just got back from this kind of the Super Bowl of this the biggest data center conference in the world was just a few weeks ago. And people attended internationally, and my sense is that, and a lot of people there are claim they're working on these huge massive campuses in rural areas that's going to be AI training models where they get and I it'll be interesting to see if some of that smoke actually turns into fire or there's kind of real projects around that or the adoption, it's going to be there. All of the big groups, are sent, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Oracles, the AWSs, as I said, the Metas. Meta's a little different because, they work for their own, it's their own network and their own product. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much of the AI stuff is really adopted where it's, these large centers actually doing it. And I think a lot of it will happen versus just the regular cloud computing, which, everyone needs, and that's growing really fast anyway. And that's sort of you're just down the where, yeah, everybody's app, everybody's records, everybody's everything, so that is that growth of AI really going to outpace and dwarf just regular cloud computing. I think it's going to be there. It's going to be a lot, but this idea that we're going to have these gigawatt campuses everywhere, doing nothing but AI and stuff. I don't think that's going to be lumpy and slow. So
Hmm. Yeah, great insights there. And it's interesting how 2018 doesn't seem that long ago, but you had that anecdote about how that initial project where they were concerned that, wanted to make sure that you could turn it into a warehouse if this didn't work out. It's amazing how far we've come in just, what, 7 years now in this
oh,
sector.
completely. And even on the capital acceptance, as these, projects get larger and the cost of it is that we were, there's so much more, which I think is just kind of good for everybody. There's so many more, pension funds and institutional money that really like the data center space. If you're exposed to, the institutional credit that want to, would love nothing more than to buy a project with a 20-year lease and just clip a coupon, on it, replacing sort of the not replacing, but adding to the industrial and apartment kind of world of that, um, which is good because there's so much money out there trying to get a return. And for these core groups, these insurance companies and life companies and pension funds that just want that stable, de-risked 5% return to, go that I think this credit-worthy data center build, is really good for that capital market side.
Mhm. Well, great. Well, thanks for your time, Drew, and good luck with your projects. It was great talking to you, and hopefully we can stay in touch.
That'd be great. Yeah, anytime, Brian. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.